Welcome back to World Crisis Radio. Webster Tarpley here in Washington, D.C. So that was the background from Putin 6 years ago, 5 or 6 years ago, about who runs these things. The British intelligence in particular has been present in the Caucasus and the northern Caucasus, especially in that ethnic labyrinth of small peoples who were living essentially several centuries behind the achieved standard of even Central Europe or Eastern Europe. There was a war, the Caucasian War, as it's called, which was from about the time of the Napoleonic Wars, starts about 1810, 1815, and goes on until about the end of the American Civil War. So it's a period of about half a century of constant warfare between the Russian Empire and these various tribes. There's no other way to put it. That's what they were at the time, with also the Ottoman Empire getting into the act from the south, because this is where these two empires essentially collided. So at that point, you get the British going in, and that features the well-known sponsor, the protector of Marx, and that is David Urquhart. David Urquhart of the British Foreign Office, British ambassador to the Ottoman Empire, tremendous hater of Russia, and the guy who had this theory that Lord Palmerston was a Russian agent, which he made Marx write a book about. So that British intelligence penetration of the Caucasus, northern Caucasus, is a matter of record over about 150 years or more. Specifically, though, why now? Well, Ukraine, as of now, the Orange Revolution, this demagogic NATO coup d'etat with Zbigniew Brzezinski heavily engaged, and the Brzezinski family, has now been completely rolled back, right? The puppet IMF NATO agent president, Yushchenko, is out. His term has expired. He's gone. And Timoshenko, the gas princess, who was the prime minister, she's also out. So you now have Yanukovych with a much more moderate and sort of down-the-middle government, which is going to look for the economic welfare of Ukraine, presumably, or at least of the nomenclatura there. But at least that's something, and that's going to be done in cooperation with the European Union on the one hand and Russia on the other. So the provocateur role of Ukraine, and this was a huge thing, 50 to 60 million people transformed into a gambit of agent provocateurs, that's all over. And Ukraine will not be joining NATO. They will not be taking part in aggressive military alliances. And that, in turn, leaves Saakashvili, the fascist madman of Georgia, out there at the end of his limb in the southern Caucasus. He is now cut off from any nearby state that's going to come to his aid. So the Ukrainian color revolution has been wrapped up. The Iran color revolution has failed, and part of that is due to Russian support. Remember, Ahmadinejad, at the height of the crisis last summer, flew immediately to the Shanghai Cooperation Organization and was warmly welcomed by Medvedev, Putin, and others. Notice the information I have is that the Russian contractors are once again building the Bushehr nuclear reactor, something the U.S. wants to sabotage for all the reasons that we know. The South Stream pipeline is gathering support. Indeed, the South Stream seems to be the winner. The NATO-sponsored Nabucco pipeline seems to be going nowhere. Turkey, Italy, others joining in on the South Stream pipeline, which allows Russia to send fuel, natural gas, oil into Western Europe without crossing over the territory of provocateur states. So many things going on. We've also got a tremendous rage against Putin. It was shown in the Washington Post here a couple of weeks ago. Anders Aslund, one of the architects of the disastrous IMF shock therapy of the 1990s, had a very vicious op-ed saying it's the end of the Putin era and that the Putin people are out. Well, I wouldn't say so. Putin today is in Caracas, Venezuela, with a very high-profile summit with Hugo Chavez of Venezuela and also Evo Morales of Bolivia. So a three-way summit which is obviously going to mean a lot in the way of economic deals and related stuff. So that's the story then with Russia. There is, however, at the same time, the fact that the U.S. and Russia have arrived, it seems, at some kind of a understanding on the replacement for the START, Strategic Arm Reduction Treaty, dating back to the early 90s, and that's going to be then a second round of this nuclear arms reduction. The details of this are frankly not known, or at least I don't know them yet. It looks like both sides come down to about 1,550 warheads. We'll have to evaluate that. That's complicated stuff. It's just important that this is not going to be singing tomorrows. It's not going to be any kind of détente that I can see, but simply a technical thing, which I don't know if it's going to have such a huge influence on the entire world situation. So that's the story then with Russia. I see continuous tension there. Certainly, one of the purposes of this of these bombing attacks is an attack on Putin. Putin has, of course, staked his reputation on his ability to crush terrorism, to prevent terrorism, and now this has not gone well. So you can imagine inside the bureaucracy various people arguing that Putin's methods are not effective, and therefore one ought to make a deal and accept subservience to the U.S. and the British, and outline the various benefits you could get from that on the Russian side. I don't think that's going to work. I think Putin's position is, as far as I can see, too strong, and this continuous series of trips around the world, always bringing back very significant contracts, energy, arms exports, things like this, indicate that this is not a winning strategy. But of course, the U.S. and the British, they know no other game, and they're going to keep doing this as long as they're around. But now let's step back for a minute from the events of the week, and let's get the big picture, the panorama. What I see at the time of Easter week of 2010 now is indeed a kind of implosion, or perhaps beginning of an implosion, of the U.S. strategic position worldwide. Is a very, very definite crumbling of the U.S. power to intervene in other countries, in particular the essence of imperialism, constant meddling, interference in the internal affairs of sovereign states in defiance of their wishes and of international law. Let's give a couple of examples, and we'll do that when we come back here on World Crisis Radio.